And we're back.
We had 2 Jeeps, because a whole bunch of us were going to go, even the military men. And I carried an M16 gun. My mother drove one Jeep. My father drove the other Jeep. And we went the entire length over to Pusan. And when we got to Pusan, we didn't know what we were going to do. And they didn't. There were so many dependents. There were thousands from Seoul, as you can imagine, and Incheon. They really didn't know what to do with us when they knew we had to get out of there, but they didn't know where to put us. So,
I mean, they just herded you into.
well, it must have been horrible up in Seoul because.
Water.
But I think they might have flown a lot of them out up in Seoul. But see, we had no way. There was no airport. There was nothing there.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting on a fertilizer ship that happened to be in port in Pusan. And that, of course, my father couldn't go. He ended up in Pusan. He never did go back, as far as I know. He couldn't.
Yeah.
And I remember the houseboy cried when we left. I remember him. He was so upset. Well, we were upset. And then we got on this fertilizer ship, and we landed, my mother and I, it's only overnight, the southernmost part of Japan. And they didn't really have a place for us to stay or anything. So we stayed in barracks, and we had to work our way up to at least to Tokyo. But they had so many dependents, it took a while, because this was in June, the end of June. And we ended up for 2 weeks in General Walker's summer home,
Wow.
which was palatial. And it had a pool, and had a pool
Deluxe.
table too. And we had a very good time, let me tell you. And the food was good too, because we ate in the dining room. He wasn't there, of course. And then we went by train, a Japanese train, and we stopped at different places. It was about like being in the plane, but this time when we stopped, because they were shuttling the dependents out
Yeah.
and giving us room at the same time, because we were among the last to get out. And finally, we took a train from Yokohama up to the northernmost part of Japan, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was where they had the Olympics.
Yeah.
You know where I mean? Right next to the Aleutian Islands, actually.
Yeah.
And I am 5'8", and I am in a Japanese train in a fetal position on the bunk because it was too darn short, as you can imagine. But it was fine, and then we drove right by Hiroshima, and the tower is right there next to the tracks, and the train stops. Nobody could go out, but you could look at it and see it, and the train stopped.
How did you react to seeing that?
I was thrilled to be able to see it. It was horrible, of course, but nevertheless, I was thrilled to be able to see it.
But you only looked at it from the train. You didn't go into the town and walk around.
We weren't allowed out. The train had a schedule to keep, for one thing. And at this point, there were very few dependents because, see, we came from only 8. And, of course, the men had to stay.
Yeah.
And then we ended up at a base up in this northern Japan, and then we flew home, not home, we flew to Alaska, but we had to refuel at Attu, and Attu is the last island in the Aleutians, and a lot of people don't know this, but Attu was attacked by the Japanese.
During the war. Yeah.
And the government kept it very quiet because they didn't want people to panic. But that was the first attack on American soil in, I guess, since the Civil War. No, just in the Civil War, I guess, yeah. But not really the Civil War. I don't know. The first attack on American soil
No.
that I can think of.
There was the War of 1812, you could argue. It was the British that did it.
Whatever, a long time ago. And then we stopped in Alaska, and then we came and flew down to San Francisco, to Moffett Field again. But my mother had bought a brand new Studebaker Lark car that we had waiting for us at the airfield. So we got out of the plane, got in the car, and drove home.
Drove all the way back to Morristown
Morristown, yeah.
from California.
From California. Not but to my mother and I, just the two of us.
What route did you take?